In your life, you deserve to be more, do more, have more, and give more. And now the Becoming More podcast with Dianna Kokoszka.
Welcome to Becoming More. Once again, we will be hearing from a great person. Now, I've known this person for a long time. Not that either one of us are very old, for heaven's sakes, we're not. In fact, we just keep looking younger every year, much like you are that's watching this or listening to it, right? But Shaun Nepstad and I started knowing each other through John Maxwell. We went to a program called Exchange, and it's all about leadership and experiences and just getting to build those deep relationships. And the more I got to know Shaun, the more I realized that he is a great leader. And he's developed many leaders. And that's what's important, not just being a leader, developing leaders. And he is now the owner, the founder, the one that writes all the content, the one that produces and gives us the content and Killer Culture. And I don't know about you, you probably heard the old saying that culture eats strategy for lunch, breakfast, dinner, whatever else, right? Yet, who teaches you about culture? And do you really speak about culture? Now, I had the opportunity with Shaun inviting me into one of his programs, and I watched it, Shaun, and I've got to tell you, great content, great foundation that you're laying, and then having the podcast, or I should say the Zoom call, where everybody gets to talk and participate, and you do teaching, asking questions. So let's dive in about this thing called culture that everybody thinks they have, and yet if you go in there and ask people, they may say something different than the owner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in one sentence, if you can remember this sticky statement that culture is anything you create or tolerate. There's not one thing in our organizations, our companies, or our families, or our homes that we're not responsible for because we either created it or we're tolerating it. And what I love about you, Dianna, is yes, we have been to several countries together with John Maxwell, and you carry culture so well. You are a builder of culture and a proponent of culture. You have done such an incredible job. But it was so funny to me because we have traveled together probably for 5, 6 years now. But then I went to your conference in Nashville and I saw you in your element. And I thought to myself, it's so fun to see you now in your element, teaching people, adding so much value. I thought to myself, I've known you as a friend, but you are a boss in your own right. You have incredible content and such a unique ability to inspire and motivate people for greatness. So I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. And here's the greatest part about it. We both believe in culture. We know you made a statement that the one that speaks about culture will be the one that people remember the most. So why don't more people speak about culture then?
Well, I think most people have their focus on the wrong thing. And if I was to build a house, I'm not thinking about the foundation. I'm thinking about the curb appeal. I'm thinking about my first Christmas there, where I can hang the stockings over the fireplace mantle and where you're going to put pictures and drapes and all those things. But most people are not thinking about what's fundamental and foundational. They are focused on the end result. And I think most business people are focused on bottom line and building a company that will impact and create income for future generations even, but they're not thinking about what will get them there. And in my opinion, culture always trumps everything. CATE. Let me introduce you to new friend Kate. Your new friend Kate. CATE. Culture always trumps everything. And I'll tell you this, every CEO, every executive, every manager of employees knows what I'm about to say is true. Whoever controls the culture is the most powerful person in your organization, regardless of title. I've seen people in organizations who don't even have a title or position, but they control. They control the feel, the atmosphere of everything else that's going on in the company. And that's what I think we need to do. We need to come back to not just bottom line. Let's come back to building the type of healthy culture, not just that you want, but that your company demands for you to win.
You know, I love what you're saying because you're right. The curb appeal versus the foundation. Nobody says, hey, come see my new house. They just poured the foundation. The rebarb is to die for, right? Nobody wants to look at that. They want to see something. What happens when a company is so focused on, say, growth or profits? What do you see happen to the culture?
Well, there's a difference between inflammation and growth. A lot of companies experience inflammation and they confuse it with growth. Inflammation is bad, growth is healthy. So some companies have grown through inflammation. They just grew very quickly, but did not guard or build the type of culture to sustain what they've built and to maintain it. And what happens is there's injuries. There's injuries that occur on the job. And it's so funny because in some warehouses I've been to, they have this sign that says, and they write it with a marker, an expo marker, 207 days accident free. And then there's an accident and they wipe it down and put 0. Okay, got to start all over. They have something like that to monitor and to reward and celebrate accidents that haven't happened. How many days they've gone without accidents. I wonder how many days we would go if we did that and we graded our culture accidents. How many days or weeks have we gone without a culture problem? We'd have to be erasing the number probably every day and just start off at 0. So I think the main focus ought to be, let's come back to what is most important in order to build everything else on the proper culture. And that needs to be the focus.
Well, you see a lot of things up on the walls of companies, like Enron had integrity. We know how far that went, right?
Yeah.
Yet, what is it about having things on the walls, yet not living those things? What does that cause to the culture in the company?
Well, most people think that they're going to change the culture by a new slogan or a banner in the break room. And that's why you have to be very, very honest, which is difficult because most CEOs and executives are alpha dogs. They don't want to be told something's not working. But you have to assess, first of all, where you really are before you can address any issue. When you go to the doctor, the first thing he says is, what seems to be the problem? If you tell him, nothing, I'm good, and your gallstones are killing you or your knee is killing you, then what help is there going to be for you? So I think if there can be an honesty about where we are, because I've noticed this, Dianna, not everybody does not carry what they claim. Everybody claims to have the perfect culture. I don't think that's always true. And so you can try to grow wounded, you can try to grow unhealthy, but you're not going to attain the goal that you're desiring. So what happens is you lose good leaders. Good leaders will not stay where they see toxic culture. As a matter of fact, there was a crazy statistic, and that is that in 2021, 42% of employees were contemplating leaving their company. 2 years later, 61%. Went from 42% in 2021 to 61% in 2023.
Oh, my word.
What is that number now? Over 70%. Well, I'm talking about 3/4, at least a half to 3/4 of your employees are currently, right now, contemplating leaving your company. And one of the main reasons is dysfunctional culture. They will go to another company and take less pay because it's not worth their mental health. They want benefits and they want good systems and all that. Yes. But toxic culture is one of the number one reasons people leave. And so then you ask yourself, how much does it cost to replace an employee? Every time we fire or hire, I talked to a guy who's in my Killer Culture Academy program, and I said, how much does it cost you? He said, 6 figures. Easy. 6 figures. Every single time it costs us 6 figures. So it's costing you more than you think. Every day you don't address toxic culture in your company, it would be like you just driving down the road, throwing cash out the window. And so if you address this, it affects everything else.
Well, and what you said right at the beginning, culture is what you tolerate. And so let's get to a company that's doing a lot of growth, and they keep hitting growth, growth, growth. We got to grow, we got to grow. And we're growing with these people coming in that maybe don't have our culture, and we're not teaching them or establishing that culture. What does that do to a company?
I say it this way: a leader has to communicate and create culture 3 times. Once in
Okay.
your head, once in your hand, and once in the team. Most leaders are frustrated because they're holding people to a standard that lives in their head. So if you go to a football game, the boundary lines have been predetermined before the game ever begins. So when somebody steps out of bounds and the ref calls them on that, there's no argument. The guy who was running out of bounds did not say, "What are you talking about? Nobody told me I couldn't step over this line." No, we predetermined where the boundary lines were before the game began. And we were very clear on that. We all agreed on that. And now you stepped out of bounds. What happens when you don't communicate clear culture and establish clear culture? Somebody steps out of bounds, and either you don't correct it, or when you do correct it, it turns into a fight. And they're saying, "Nobody told me I couldn't do X, Y, and Z." So it's
Exactly.
clearly establishing the boundary lines. And when I say you have to create it 3 times, once in your head, once in your hand, I mean you need to have a playbook. Let's go back to mission, vision, values. Let's comb through those. We have them because we needed to put them on a website. But are they ingrained in your culture, in your team, where they are rehearsed often and referred to? Do people know them, live by them? And I would take it a step further and say it's not just mission, vision, values. It's also language, character, conduct, behavior, spirit. Like, I go to this one establishment. If I said the name, you would all know them because you've been to this place. And when I go there, everybody in the workers, they'll greet me, and this is how they do it. "Welcome in. Welcome in." What? No eye contact. No warmness. And I know what they're doing. I know, I get it. They were
Yeah.
trained by their leader to say, "Welcome in." But I promise you, they are not carrying the spirit in which they were taught. So some people think in their minds, "I'm doing what I was told." Yeah, but you're not doing it the way we communicated. So
Right.
let me say it another
There's
way.
no heart with it. There's no heart whatsoever, just up in their head, right?
Absolutely. So you're having to take this culture and get it deep within the organization. So my daughters, when they were young, they liked this one guava drink. It was in the frozen section of the grocery store. And I'm talking about the kind where you take it out of the can and it still has the shape of the can. You know what I'm talking about. Well, it asked for 3 cans of water to be added to this. And with 4 daughters, uh, I added 6. I wanted to make it stretch. And they were experiencing a hint of the intended product, but they were actually only experiencing a diluted version of it. What happens is oftentimes in companies, there are people that they take a little bit about what you've taught them and they have diluted it. And they say, "What? I did what you say." Yeah, but you're giving a diluted version. I need you to carry the character, the conduct, the spirit, the language, all of what we have here. I'm giving this to you to then pass on because, well, otherwise they look at them and they represent you as a leader and they walk away saying, "I'll never do business with this company again." And they have never even met you. They didn't have a bad experience with you. They had a bad experience with somebody who represented you, who did not carry the proper culture.
Right, because they are that company, right? It reminds me of Jeff Henderson also saying, "What do you stand for? What does your company stand for?" And oh, by the way, if I went out and asked everybody, what do they stand for? Would they say the same thing?
Mm.
And you and I were talking the other evening, and I was speaking about Jack Welch, who to me, he sold vision. I mean,
Yeah.
he talked vision all the time. And when I had dinner with he and his wife, Susie, he said to me, "Dianna, I talked about vision so much. I thought that if I had to say it one more time, I was going to throw up, yet I kept saying it." And he always went to the work floor and spoke to them about the culture, the vision, the mission, all of that. And then he spoke with the leaders. He said, I never went to the leaders first. I went to the people that were doing the work, because
Right.
if they don't know it, doesn't matter if my leader knows it. It's how far down has it gone? And when I asked them questions, he was finding that, hey, upper management knew it, or leadership, middle management or leadership knew it. Yeah, the workforce did not know it. And
Yeah.
he said, if they don't know it, you can't do it. So what do you have to say about that? Where do you believe we've got to get it through the entire organization?
Yeah, I love the way you brought that up. If you remember tapes, everybody who's listening, do you remember tapes? I'm talking about during the 1900s, before CDs, before iPods, before all of our phones had the technology. I'm talking about old school tapes. Well, many people would make a mixtape. And what that was, if you're unfamiliar with this, is we would have to listen to the radio on a boombox, put our tapes in, and the DJs, they're coming in song after song. And when your favorite song came on, you had to press play and record. You record your jam and then press pause when the DJ spoke, and you do that over and over until you had this amazing mixtape. Well, what if you got a good mixtape? All your friends wanted a copy. I mean, they were saying, let me get your mixtape. Let me have a copy. So you being a good friend, you made a copy of your mixtape. And every time you made a copy of a copy of a copy, you lost quality. The first copy was good. By the third or fourth generation, it sounded like the band was singing underwater. You know, Whitney Houston was singing, and
Yeah, I remember those days. Not that I'm that old yet. Yes, I do.
Well, okay, so here's the question for every CEO, manager of employees, and executives. All right, let's say you have good culture. Great. But if it's cloudy for the second generation of leaders, what's the third and fourth generation getting? It loses quality. It's like you're playing telephone with people. You think you're being clear, but without saying it repeatedly, without time and proximity, without clarity, all of these things, the third and fourth generation are hearing something and then reproducing something that is so far off. And now you have an organization that is out of alignment. And when alignment is off, everything gets shaky.
Well, yes.
Attitudes get shaky, productivity gets shaky, vision, impact, communication, all get shaky.
Well, it's like driving a car with one wheel out of alignment, right? I mean, you can't go real fast. And it's interesting because every CEO, every company, I mean, we're there for production, we're there for profits. I mean, without profits, we don't stay open. So I get how important profits are, yet people put profits a lot of times above culture. And you found some statistics from Harvard. I'd love for you to share us with that research.
Yeah, Harvard did a study several years ago. I'm so glad they did because it helps us. They studied 200 companies for 11 years. 200 companies for 11 years. They found in their research that these companies that instilled and installed healthy culture increased their bottom line by 756%. 756%.
I know, I
And
can
not
hardly.
addressing, yeah, tolerating bad culture is costing you more than you think.
Well, I wonder why that statistic or that research hasn't been given to every company. Because you said 200 companies followed for 11 years.
Yeah, 11
And the
years. And
ones, wow,
they found that 756% was the number or the percentage of increase just to their bottom line. Can I give you a phrase, everybody? It's not about getting the job done. It's about getting the people done. It's not about getting the job done. It's about getting the people done. If you get the people done right, the job will take care of itself. Promise you. But most of us are focused on profits, sales goals. Those are great. Keep at it, strategy, systems, all of the advertising. But if you have all of that, and you have one employee that's running the culture, Here's the problem. Bad culture is never satisfied sitting in the back seat. Bad culture always wants to drive. It's always reaching for
Well,
the steering wheel, trying to derail and drive. And you have to be, as a leader, you're called to be the leader and to say, you're not going to drive now. And companies that don't get that, they begin to, they can still make money. But what is at what cost? If you're making money and it's costing you sleep, like what are you going to bed talking to your spouse about? Your frustration of that employee, that person who carries dysfunctional team culture. Is it worth the peace? Wouldn't you rather have the profit and enjoy life?
it's interesting how negativity and bad culture actually wins out, doesn't it? Because our brain, for some reason, is tuned or moves towards that negativity unless we fight it, unless we are
Yeah.
intentional. And I think that's what I hear you over and over again is the intentionality of putting culture first where it belongs.
Yeah. And you have to carry that, obviously, as a leader. If we were playing basketball and you didn't have the basketball, you couldn't give me the basketball. In other words, you cannot pass on what you do not possess. So if you don't carry healthy culture, you can't give healthy culture. You can't teach healthy culture. So it starts with us as a leader, for sure. But then you need to learn how to address bad culture in others. So ladies, all the ladies who are listening, and if you've ever had your nails done, you get your nails done. And what happens when one breaks off? You go in and address it. Why? The other 9 look just fine. Yeah, but that one impacts what the other 9 look like. And you can have 9 great employees, and then one counterculture carrying team member impacts what the other 9 look like. So not only do you need to carry the right culture, you need to learn how to be comfortable and effective in having the proper hard conversations in addressing bad culture because it affects everybody else.
Well, and as the Japanese say, a fish rots from the head down. Well, that's kind of the company. If we're the leader, we got to make certain that we take a stand for our people. And if we take a stand for our people's greatness, then culture is part of that. So, how many companies have you worked with to get them to go back to taking a stand for their culture more than the profits, knowing the profits will come?
Well, there's been so many. Over the last decade, I've been able to sit with people individually, one-on-one, one-on-many, and begin to train them. But I'm trying to get them to see it. Because if you don't see it, you're not working towards this. If you don't understand that the environment that you create or tolerate will affect that bottom line, then you're fooling yourself. Like, have you ever had a room temperature smoothie? Don't tell me environment doesn't matter. Environment matters. What was great and refreshing has now become repulsive. So
Yes.
it has to bother you bad enough that you recreate it and reframe it. I know bad culture bothers you. I know it does. It bothers all of us. But does it bother you enough to reframe it and to do something about it? If you've ever had a stain on your wall or a scuff on the wall or a stain somewhere in the office and you don't address it, pretty soon you're like, I don't even see it anymore. But a first-time guest, a first-time client comes in and says, why is that there? Many things we have just began to live with instead of addressing. Do you know the tower? I don't know if you've ever seen this. The Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Oh, yes.
It's an amazing, not a wonder of the world, but it's so popular. Now, here's something maybe people don't know. The Leaning Tower of Pisa. The intent was never to build the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The intent was just to build the Tower of Pisa. But in the 12th century, it began to lean. And instead of correcting it, they just began to build in that direction. Bad culture, if you don't address it, pretty soon your entire company will just begin to build in that direction. And I'm just telling you, it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Well, and you don't even notice it until you step back.
Hmm.
Because when you're in the tower, you don't know if you're leaning, you kind of wonder, but when you step back, you can see it leaning. So I heard you say awareness is the first step to change. So how do people become aware of their culture if they're immersed in it and believing they have great culture?
I think you're you're probably 10 conversations away from really understanding where you are. Have 10 conversations with people in your company, clients that you trust enough to have this conversation, and they'll be honest with you. But most people, we just kind of go based on what we feel. You know, I feel like we're doing great. And then if you spoke to some people, it would probably be another message. So if you took your hand like this, both hands, this hand represents what you say your culture is. And then this hand represents what your culture actually is. They ought to line up. Unfortunately, in a lot of companies, it's like this. What people say, this is, oh, we have great culture. And then people experience them and they're like, I don't see that at all. And one of the worst things to do, I don't know if you've ever been here in Diana, but you hear somebody talking about their company, about all the things they do, and then somebody who works for them is beside them shaking their head saying, we don't do that.
No, no, you don't get that. That is not who they are. That is not what they do. It's like Clint Pulver when he wrote his book. I love it here. He went in as an undercover. He was a
Yeah.
millennial, and he went in and he said, "I'm thinking about working here. What do you think?" And boy, he got to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he actually went back. And some of the CEOs really desired to hear it, and some of them didn't want to hear it at all because they knew their company, they knew what it was like, yet they really didn't know what it was like. If you say you care about people and it takes you 5 days to get back with somebody, really, you really do care about them?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, what advice do you have for our people that are listening or watching this today? I mean, obviously, get on your killer culture. Tell us a little bit about that in case they're interested here.
Sure. It's a program that I've come up with. The whole concept is to help CEOs, executives, and anybody that has employees deal with dysfunctional team culture. Because here's what I know. You're paying too much in turnovers. It's costing you, bottom line. It's affecting your mental health. And it's not worth it. So wouldn't it be better to reassess, reevaluate, rebuild, reframe the culture that you have and the kind of culture that your company demands? So it's called Killer Culture Academy because we're all either building a killer culture or our culture is killing us. And if you go to
That's good.
killercultureacademy.com, killercultureacademy.com, you can sign up for a program and it will rotate through different seasons of the year. But here's what I know. People don't like to say that we have toxic culture. You know, we might have an employee that people are walking on eggshells around, but I wouldn't say our culture is toxic. Let me give you the definition of toxic. The definition of toxic is anything that's harmful, unpleasant, or unhealthy. Anything that's harmful, unpleasant, or unhealthy. So let me ask again, do you have anybody in your current company that is harmful, unpleasant, or unhealthy in their character, conduct, or speech? Anybody walking on eggshells around somebody else in your company? It could be that there's some dysfunctional team culture that you could address and begin to save thousands of dollars and thousands of people, uh, in the world, in the nation, in companies that would not be leaving to flood other companies. They would be staying put, growing, and producing the type of outcome that you're desiring.
Oh, Shaun, this is so good. You get me all excited as far as the culture and that goes, because you show me the way the culture is going, then you automatically know the way that the company is going because it kind of leads the way for certain. I remember a lady, her name is Mona Covey, and she worked with me and helped me with the BOLD program. She made the workbook, her and Julie Fentecchi. And in working with her, I said, "Tell me about the company you were with before." And she said, "Oh, it was fabulous in the sense that, when you went to work for them, you learned the mission and vision. You were taught the culture. In fact, they would come around and say, what's the mission of the company? And boy, as an employee, every one of us knew it because one, we learned it before we ever got to go to our desk, right? You had to know it. Two, we were asked about it all the time. Three, we were told about it all the time. More importantly, though, they celebrated when they lived it. And there was celebration after celebration with people that had done something that established that culture within the company. And I think sometimes we celebrate profits, we celebrate growth, yet what are we doing to celebrate culture? Have you had any great ideas from people out there, or you've heard because you work with so many CEOs?
Yeah, the one of the greatest things that I can do is you find out how people feel appreciated. What motivates people? Because what motivates you doesn't motivate everybody else. Some people are motivated by money. Many people are motivated by words of affirmation. It's almost like, a husband and wife relationship. There's a book called The Five Love Languages, and the problem with that is that some people are throwing love languages at their spouse, and their spouse does not feel loved by them because it's not the way they feel love. So how do your employees, your managers, the executives, what would they need from you to feel appreciated and to feel celebrated? And then specifically do a little research on that. Reward what you want repeated. I said reward what you want repeated.
I was just going to say, let's repeat that over and over
Yeah.
because a lot of people want to look and point out the bad behavior or the things they don't want instead of saying, hey, you did that well. Hey, I really like the way you did that, reinforcing the good. And, we have this saying, my husband and I, don't complain about what you tolerate. And don't lie awake at night worrying about people that don't lie awake at night worrying about you, right?
Very good.
And that's kind of a little bit of a culture right there that you're talking about is don't tolerate the culture that you don't desire. So what
Yeah.
parting words do you have for our listeners today?
Well, I would just say this. For your clients, you don't have to be the best. You just have to be their favorite. What makes you come back to a restaurant? I have restaurants that I go to. They're not the best in the world, but I like it when I'm there. I like the way I feel. I like the way they make me feel. And you don't have to be the absolute best because there's a lot of competition. You're not the only one who does what you do. And the reason people will pick you over 10 other companies that could produce the exact same outcome is the way that you make them feel. And the way that you make them feel will be helped by if your employees are carrying the same heart, vision, conduct, character, spirit, language that you want, and they're the ones that are representing you. So again, people do not lead the way you expect them to lead. They lead the way they think things ought to be led. So have you built the kind of culture that you want replicated? And then are you teaching them to carry and reproduce the culture you've created so that it sticks in rooms you're not even present in? It takes work. It takes a lot of work, but you can do it. There are companies that have done it, and so can you.
I love that. And maybe you can help me with this one thought. I forget who the prime minister, he was running against a gentleman, and he was a very smart, intelligent man, one of the best, and everyone expected him to win. Only it was a shock that the other person won. And so they were interviewing this lady who was very well known in the country, and they said, so why do you think this guy won? Nobody expected him to win. And she said, oh, that was very simple. I can tell you. I went to dinner with both of them. And the first man, yes, he is brilliant. Yes, he is intelligent. And yes, he could have done wonders for our country. And when I was with him, I felt like he was the most intelligent and the best person in the world. Yet when I went to dinner with the other gentleman, I thought I was the most intelligent and most wonderful person in the world. And I think that's why he won. So that's how you're helping people. So to help their folks feel wonderful, feel terrific, and know that they're cared about in the company that they work for. And I went on your podcast today. I looked at Killer Culture. I recommend it to everyone. It's not only great content, it's presented in a way that is very easy because you do it at your own pace. And then, of course, the Zoom calls are about all Q&A and discussions with other CEOs. So great job, Shaun. Thank you so much for being with us today. And remember, do not tolerate what you do not want, and go and find out what your culture is. Go back, step back, look, and see if maybe it's leaning. Join us next Tuesday for another podcast on becoming more, because we're here to help you not only exist, but to become more every single day. Thank you so much.
In your life, you deserve to be more, do more, have more, and give more. And now the Becoming More podcast with Dianna Kokoszka.